For those of you not familiar with the Presbyterian Historical Society, we were founded in 1852 in Philadelphia. We are the oldest denominational archives in the United States, and we currently serve as the National Archives of the Presbyterian Church USA and its predecessor denominations. Our mission is to collect, preserve, and share the story of the American Presbyterian experience. Providing assistance to family history researchers is one way we accomplish our mission. PHS operates as a centralized archives rather than a regional system. So we hold on deposit records of approximately 12,000 active and dissolved congregations from across the country, and including Puerto Rico. The deposit of church records is voluntary, so not every single congregation is represented in our holdings. Also, some Presbyterian church records are stored at Presbyterian seminaries or other historical societies, but we are the main repository. Our website contains a lot of information about conducting genealogy research using our holdings. From our main webpage, which you see here, www.history.pcusa.org, you can click on the services section, and from there you can scroll down to find genealogy and family history research. On the genealogy and family history research page, you'll see links to a couple different resources. The one I would like to draw everybody's attention to right now is the Genealogy Frequently Asked Questions. Here's what that page looks like. If you haven't yet, we encourage you to read through this page before you begin your research, as it answers the most common questions that we receive about genealogy research. The FAQ includes links to our catalogs, to other helpful resources, as well as information about how to gain access to the records in our holdings. So a lot of what we're going to say today is in this FAQ. So if you just want to sit back and relax and go back and read this later, you can do that. I'm going to turn things over to Lisa now, so that she can walk you through the process of actually searching our catalogs and databases. And then I'll take over again after that, and we'll take some questions hopefully at the end. So go ahead, Lisa.
Okay, thank you, Charlene. Let me go ahead and bring up my share screen here. Okay. Okay, perfect. And I have a few notes written out to help keep myself on track here. So most records of interest to genealogists at PHS are created at the congregation level. And these records tend to be the registers and the minutes of the church session. There are no centralized denominational registers of marriages, baptisms, membership, and unfortunately, we do not have a comprehensive index to all of the family names that appear in church records. It might be helpful for you to know that Presbyterians only recognize 2 sacraments. Those are baptism and communion. That can create some issues for genealogists simply because they're not always consistent with documenting marriages or deaths, particularly deaths. In some instances, churches might create death registers, but that's certainly not the general rule. Another important point might be that Presbyterians are also not required to bury their dead in any particular way, and we also have very few cemetery records in our holdings. If you are not aware, Presbyterian history is incredibly complex. We usually encourage genealogists to explore sort of the history genealogy of the particular church that is of interest to them, or the churches where they believe their ancestors worshiped. And that can be very important in terms of some of the examples I'll show you from searching through catalogs. You can find and again, I have our homepage pulled up here. I'm going to move that down a bit. The History Online section includes some general information about Presbyterian history in America. There's a section there that includes a family tree of Presbyterian denominations. I'll just click on this one PDF. And as you can see, there are a lot of different denominations that have been active in the United States, going way back to 1789 with the first denomination, the Presbyterian Church in the USA. One of our former public services assistants affectionately called this the plumbing chart. And it can be very important to understand the history of the particular church, because there are certainly circumstances where there will be records for 2 or more different churches with basically the same name that were both active in the same city and state over time. The next, let me go ahead and just get rid of some of these to make this easier. The next slide I wanted to take, whoops, am I on that one? Okay. Let me make sure I'm in the right spot. Well, let me go back here to the collections page. And I apologize if you can hear all my clicking here. In the Shepherd catalog, we have a tool called Hall's Index of American Presbyterian Congregations. And this particular index, I'm going to go to Advanced Search. This index can basically assist you in determining the correct name and location of both active and dissolved congregations, as well as allow you to search for congregations located in a particular state and city over time. One example I wanted to show everyone is St. Louis. I think most people type in St. Louis, and there's the state, Missouri. So let me move do search, and this tells you we don't have any records. That is because, let's go back, advanced search, and oops. You need to spell out the word saint. So always keep that in mind when you're doing catalog searches. There could be quirks that you don't anticipate. So within St. Louis, and Missouri was a complicated state. You had a lot of different Presbyterian denominations that were active in Missouri over time. And just a couple examples, even just on the first page here, you can see there are 2 congregations called Bethany Presbyterian Church, both in St. Louis. If we click on the record for this one, you can see this was first reported to the General Assembly in 1894 by the Presbytery of St. Louis. This would have been a Presbyterian Church in the USA congregation. It went through a name change the following year. Oops, if we go back to the other Bethany. And you can see this particular Bethany Presbyterian Church was organized in 1889, but by the Presbyterian Church in the US. So always be aware of those things. I wanted to also point out, see on page 4 here, there are a number of First Presbyterian churches in St. Louis. This record is specifically for the Presbyterian Church in the USA congregation. And let me go back to, and then there was also a First United Presbyterian Church, St. Louis. So this is one of the United Presbyterian Church of North America congregations. But when you're searching records, you know, the information might very well just come up as First Presbyterian Church, St. Louis, Missouri. So trying to be aware that you need to try to figure out what particular denomination your relative perhaps was connected with. Let's see, moving on. This was a search I had already put in for Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is also a very complicated city. You can see there was a church here called 43rd Street Presbyterian Church. And you can see that the way it was entered in halls is with the numerals for 43rd. If I click on that record, it shows that this church was first reported in 1884, and it withdrew from the denomination in 1962. Try to remember that as we go to the catalogs to actually then search for some of these records. Next search I had done was for Springfield, Ohio. You know, essentially there's, I think, a Springfield in every state in the country. So like, well, let's try that. So again, you kind of see there's two. There's a First Presbyterian Church, Springfield, First United. So those are representative of two completely separate denominations. And let me go ahead and click on the First Presbyterian Church here. The information tells you, you know, it was organized in the early part of the 19th century. And in 1920, it merged with Covenant Presbyterian Church, which we do see. Let's see. And how did I get back to St. Louis? Oh, good grief. Where's 43rd? Well, I don't know why it took me back to St. Louis. But at any rate, the you have those two different churches in Springfield, Ohio. So at any point, we are going to search the Calvin catalog, which you also get to when you're at our homepage. If you go to the collection section, that will take you to the Calvin catalog. And I preloaded a search for the 43rd Street Presbyterian Church in Pittsburgh. And as you can see in the search box, I typed out the word 43rd, which is typical for the Calvin catalog. And if I hit go, okay. Scroll down. Here you can see we do have some records for the 43rd Street Presbyterian Church. And if you click on this, you can view the full catalog record. And this shows that we have 11 volumes for this congregation. You can kind of see the date range span for all of the records is the 1883 to 1962, with matches, you know, generally matches up with the information that was in Hall's index. You can also see that there appear to be some gaps in the records. Those records that would likely be of most interest to a genealogist would be the registers here. There's 4 volumes. For whatever reason, it looks like there's a gap generally sort of in the 19-teens up to about World War II era. So my best guess is somehow one of the registers was lost or destroyed at some point. And unfortunately, the session minutes don't begin until 1924. But if those 4 volumes are consistent and cover that whole time span, those missing registers, possibly you could find the information you want within the session minutes for that. So we do have those records for the 43rd Street Presbyterian Church. Gotta keep myself going. Here is a search I kind of preloaded for just, let's say, Presbyterian Church records related to congregations in Springfield, Ohio. And I get 24 results, and I'm looking for, here's a good example. So here's First Presbyterian Church, Springfield, and based on some of the added entries here for author, you can see that these are the records of the First Presbyterian Church that was connected with the United Presbyterian Church of North America denomination. And then the full catalog record will give you a general overview of what records we have. Again, the focus would be looking for the session minutes and church registers and whatnot for that. Make sure it actually takes me back to what I think it will. If I go back to the results on that, I think we also have some records for just, yes, for just the First Presbyterian Church. So as you're searching the catalogs, you know, be aware that this would be the First Presbyterian Church connected to the Presbyterian Church in the USA. So then this catalog record shows you some of that. And unfortunately, it looks like down here, there's also a note that the cataloger had made that all of these records were charged out. Unfortunately, charged out is spelled, or charged is spelled incorrectly. We every so often find little errors on the catalog as well. Back in November of 1976. And one other search here I wanted to try. We recently were asked for some baptism records for sort of the mid-20th century for a church in Marion, Indiana. It was a Westminster Presbyterian church. And if you search Calvin, so most church records are going to be cataloged in Calvin, not all of them. Okay, why did that say? Sorry, did I spell all of that correctly? Presbyterian Church, Marion. Okay, let's see if this shows me what I expect. Let me make sure that I spell that correctly. Maybe it's an A-N. No results. Okay, well, so I see no results for this particular church in this catalog. You can also go to, again, now I'm back in the Shepherd catalog, and there's a number of different databases that can be searched within Shepherd. So some congregation records are cataloged only in the archives database at this point. So you can find that going here. I have that pulled up. I'm in the advanced search mode, and for the main creator, I typed in the name of that church, and hopefully this will show me what I think it will show me. Okay, yes, it does show me there are records of this church spanning 1949 to 2017, and if you click on the accession number there, you can view kind of a full catalog record that will list out what session minutes and registers we have. So those are my basic examples of searching both Hall's Index, the Calvin catalog, as well as archives database to try to locate records of particular congregations. Trying to keep things moving along a little bit. Just wanted to emphasize within registers and session minutes of congregations are the types, registers generally are going to include lists of members, baptisms, marriages, possibly deaths. Many registers, which are those lists of names and dates, will often include both a chronological list and an alphabetical list of members. For the most part, registers with for baptisms and marriages are going to be just chronological. Baptism records for infants will generally have the infant's name, the name of the parents, their date of birth, the date of baptism, as well as the officiating minister. Marriage records will often just include the name of the couple and the date of the marriage. Sometimes the names of the witnesses will be included, but frequently the names of parents will not be recorded within marriage registers. If individuals, generally I would think either the bride or the groom or both, their families were members of the church, I would then probably search through the membership records for information about that family to see who all might have been members of the congregation. Session minutes are the records of the council of the church made up of the minister and the elders. Early session minutes are often handwritten. To locate information, you really need to read through them page by page. They're not indexed and they're organized chronologically. So it's a little bit more challenging to find information via session minutes. They often will always mention membership information. Sometimes they will mention baptisms and marriages, but not always. So I guess hopefully that was somewhat helpful, and I'll send you back to Charlene for the last part of the session.
I want to interrupt you guys. I have a couple questions from the attendees. Do you mind answering a few right now?
Okay.
We had a question about the 50-year restriction on records. Do you guys want to talk about that?
Sure. I think most official records of the denomination are restricted anything less than 50 years old. So at this point, those records that would be created, I guess, in 1971 to the present. And that would include congregation records. It's also like the mid-councils, which would be presbyteries and synods, and national agency records. It's meant to protect the privacy of individuals whose names may come up in the records, as well as the information that's being discussed in those councils. Essentially, if there is a reason researchers absolutely need to access records that are less than 50 years old, they can put in a formal request to the records owners to receive permission.
We have another question about finding the records that are listed in Calvin. Vicki was wondering if the church records appear in Calvin, does that mean they can be seen online?
No, yeah. For the most part, we don't have digitized church records available to view through our catalogs. Occasionally there might be a link in a catalog record to indicate that there's some portion of the records have been digitized. Typically you would just need to reach out to us to ask about that. But the records themselves are not, you're not going to be able to just click on the link to the catalog record and view the actual records. Charlene will speak a little bit more about, like, Ancestry.com has scanned quite a few of our church records.
And we have a few more questions. I can hold them till the end if that's okay with everyone.
Yeah, I wonder if some of the questions might be answered in the next few minutes, and if not, well, we should have time to get back to them. So,
yes.
Okay. Thanks, Kristen. Thank you, Lisa, for demonstrating those searches. So now that everyone who's zooming in can search our catalogs and identify potentially relevant materials, you are wondering, how do I gain access to these materials? I'll tell you a little bit about your options. You do have several options. Obviously, we're in the middle of a pandemic, so our facility right now is closed to researchers, but once we are able to reopen safely, you're welcome to schedule an appointment to come visit. We provide access to our materials in our reading room. We're located in sunny Philadelphia, not too far from the Liberty Bell and other historic attractions. Plus, we offer free parking on a limited basis. So, you know, we do like seeing visitors in the building. You'll notice in Calvin sometimes, the catalog Calvin, that sometimes records are available on microfilm. In most cases, but not all, we can send those reels of microfilm out to a public library through interlibrary loan. So that's an option as well. Another option, if you're not able to visit, we offer a genealogy research service. I'm sharing that page here on our website. This is a for fee service. The fee is $30 and it covers up to 1 hour of research within the records of one congregation, searching for baptism, marriage, membership, or death information for one individual. So there's a form here that you can fill out online. And we usually send copies of the records. We'll either take a picture, usually we take a picture and just email it back to you. So we have that service for you. If you subscribe to Ancestry, they recently scanned the congregational records in our holdings up to 1970. This is our group of records. It's called U.S. Presbyterian Church Records, 1701 to 1970. You can see here, you can browse, at least I think this is what it looks like for people who subscribe to Ancestry, I don't know. But you should be able to browse by location and then the name of a specific congregation, or if you wanted to try searching just with your ancestors' names, you can do that as well. Ancestry did create a name index for the records of ours that they scanned. So if you know that your relatives were Presbyterian, but you're not sure which congregation they were affiliated with, this could be a really good resource to provide some clues about some of those mysteries. Please just note with Ancestry that they primarily scanned registers, not session minutes. So if all we have are session minutes of a congregation, they're likely not to be in Ancestry, but if we have registers, that might be a good resource. Also, we've received lots of records in our building since Ancestry finished their project. So any records that have come into our collection in the last couple of years will not be in this Ancestry collection here. Another resource that we sometimes direct people to is Family Search. This used to be the Genealogical Society of Utah, and they microfilmed many of the church records in our holdings a long time ago, and they provide access through their research centers. Their catalog is right here. If you go to the search tab, you can search their catalog by the name of the church to see if they might have copies of some church records in their family research centers. Those are the basics. You should be pretty well equipped now to start your own searching. If you have questions, you can email us. Feel free to direct questions to our email address here, which is refdesk@history.pcusa.org. You can also fill out this reference inquiry form with your question, and we'll try to get back to you as soon as we can. We do get lots of questions, so we appreciate your patience. In closing, we would just like to say that we're very, very grateful for our many donors and supporters who make programs like this one possible. if you would like to make a gift to PHS, please visit our website. Here's our giving page, and Kristen will share that out in the chat. And from all of us at PHS, thank you very much. And we are happy to take some more questions.
We have a question from Facebook. David Adams was wondering if we have many records for 19th century rural churches, or are most of our records from urban churches from the 20th century?
Both. We have records from churches all over the country, small little towns, you know, churches that maybe only were in existence for 20 or 30 years. And then we have records of churches that have been around since, you know, the beginning of Presbyterianism in this country, like the first Presbyterian church in Philadelphia, which is very urban. So we have records of both of those.
Yes, I might add that, you know, in an ideal world, you know, all church records would end up coming to us and they would be complete, and, you know, there wouldn't be gaps. Unfortunately, that's not the case. If records haven't been sent here, in some cases, they've ended up at, you know, local county historical societies. Sometimes colleges and universities will collect church records, you know, within their geographic region. They end up at, you know, state historical archives. So you might have to look around a little bit if we don't have them, to see if they could be elsewhere. That's why some of the more like general genealogy resources can be helpful. I know for, like, you know, one instance, a lot of churches in the state of Virginia actually have their records housed at Union Presbyterian Theological Seminary in Richmond, Virginia.
We have a question about searching for church records in the different PHS catalogs. Bonnie was wondering if to find church records, you have to go to each catalog individually, or if there's any kind of shortcut that you could take potentially.
I think you really don't. I would say the vast majority of records for churches are going to be in the Calvin catalog. If you don't find something in Calvin that you're looking for, then I would perhaps try the archives database. But if you do search Calvin and you see that we have records, I think you're safe to assume, you know, you've located what we have.
Tina was wondering if our collections include records from Covenanter or Reformed congregations.
Sometimes we do. That's a really complicated history. Some of those congregations did ultimately become part of the United Presbyterian Church of North America, which eventually merged into the current PCUSA denomination. Some of them did not. So we do have some of those records, and they're not always described in Hall's index or in our catalogs as a Covenanter or Seceder congregation, but we have ways of tracing the history of those congregations and checking to see if we have records of them.
Tina was also wondering if you have any recommendations for tracking ministers who were circuit ministers who moved from one congregation to another over the course of their career.
I mean, sometimes we have different resources we can check for ministers just using their name. Occasionally, some individuals are really difficult to locate much information. It does become more difficult if you're looking for records or ministers who were active prior to the establishment of the Presbyterian Church in the USA in 1789. It's just there wasn't a consistent way that information was compiled that early, but we do have quite a few records of early presbyteries. So information about ministers and their activities would certainly be recorded within those presbytery minutes. They're just not as easy and straightforward as you might hope, but we do have a good number of them. So.
Barbara was wondering if there are any recommendations for churches or presbytery stated clerks for what to do with records of closed churches.
Yeah, once a congregation is dissolved or it closes, those records, the ownership of those records transfers to the presbytery, and we have a robust records management program that serves that purpose. So presbyteries can contact us again using that refdesk@history.pcusa.org email address to get information about that. We would love to take records like that in if the church is closed and they're otherwise just sitting in a closet somewhere. There's information about our records management services for congregations on our website as well. And if they do end up at PHS, we will describe them and catalog them and make them available. So that's a great question. Thanks.
Francis was wondering if you could just give a quick description of the differences between Calvin and Shepherd catalogs.
I think the Calvin catalog is more of a formal, actually Charlene might be better at responding to this, but more of a formal type of library catalog system. It's Koha, and the records that are created in there are MARC records. Essentially, the only reason, I think our records management a few years ago decided that it didn't make sense to him to create formal MARC records for church records anymore. So when they first come in the archives database, which really functions more as a database than a formal library catalog, and in that database he creates really what would be an accession record to indicate, here's the number and location information being assigned to these records, the unique identifying number, which we'll refer to as the call number or accession number. So I think it's just a matter of, from the technical point of view of staff here, just feeling that's a much easier way to describe those records going forward. Not sure if that's the greatest explanation or not, but yeah, you guys all have really good questions. I might want to also point out that it could be helpful if you're not necessarily finding church records or the church records for the time period of interest to your inquiry. If there is a published history of a church, those can be really helpful to refer to. Sometimes they'll specifically state out something about, there was a massive fire at the church in 1854, and all of the records prior to that date were lost, in the church fire. So it can help, give you some information to perhaps, determine what happened to church records you're searching for.
We have a few more questions. Bonnie was wondering what the best way to follow missionaries is. Maybe a good time to talk about some of our missionary records, and also mention that some of these topics we'll be covering in future PHS Live sessions. So we might be giving you a brief answer now, but in the future, hopefully we could give you a more thorough look into some of these questions you guys are asking.
Yeah, we do have a lot of material about Missionaries, and I'm going to, hopefully everybody can see my screen here. I'm going to just quickly point out two other parts of our website. The Shepherd catalog that Lisa mentioned has two other databases besides the archives database. Well, it has lots of other databases besides the archives database, but for researching missionaries or ministers, the two other databases that will be helpful are called the Foreign Missionary Vertical Files Index. And then this is for, this is a database saying that we have a vertical file on an individual who was a foreign missionary. You can search by their field of service, by their name, and then these files typically contain applications for missionary work, correspondence, sometimes photographs. They do not contain church records, but if your ancestor was a missionary, you could find these files really interesting. Sometimes they contain one sheet of paper, other times we'll have 4 files on one person, it just depends. The other database for ministers and also for many domestic missionaries is the Biographical Vertical Files Index here. Same thing, you can just search by a person's name, and this database will tell you that we have a file. It will not show you what's in the file, it will just tell you that we have a file. I hope that answers that question.
Anne was wondering if records from mid-council judicatory actions, if they're public, if they were over 50 years old.
To my knowledge, I believe they are. I get a little confused sometimes about some of the judicial records. For a period of time, they had been restricted for a period of 75 years, but I think they're also at the 50-year access restriction point at this.
William Craig was wondering, especially right now in light of the pandemic, how far date-wise can records be accessed? I guess in, due to our kind of travel restrictions and our buildings availability at the moment.
I mean, we have, our staff is trying to gradually return to the building in a staggered way to gain access to the collection. For a while, we were not receiving new records, but it seems like that is changing and some churches are starting to send records to us again. I mean, we have records put on deposit that go up to, the present. I'm not sure if that's exactly what the question was, but everything's kind of on pause right now in terms of some of the services we can provide, but overall it hasn't really changed our services. Things are just kind of on pause right now.
Yeah.
We have I'm sorry.
Oh, I was maybe just going to mention that we're anticipating, reopening to the general public for research in July by appointment only. So we'd likely only, allow just a couple of researchers in the building on any particular day. So if individuals are willing to, to travel and want to come in, they could do so. Again, as Charlene had mentioned, some of the records are in microfilm and that could be borrowed through interlibrary loan. I know public libraries are slowly in the process of, sort of reopening in different parts of the country. Quite a few records are on ancestry.com. Family Search is a good potential resource to locate the records. And yeah, we offer our genealogy research service for a fee. So, you know, we're doing our best, I think, to try to still maintain some level of access for materials.
We have another question from Facebook. Francis was wondering if there are any special terms or collections for records of Presbyterian high schools or colleges for young women in the mid to late 1800s.
We will usually have records of Presbyterian affiliated colleges, just because they're part of the mission of the denomination. So those records have been collected sort of at the denomination level, Board of National Missions Department, for example, or agency, Board of National Missions records. But those records, by and large, do not include student information. So if you know that one of your ancestors attended a school, we could probably give you information about the school, maybe find a pamphlet describing it with some photographs, maybe a published history of the college would list some of the students' names, but we generally do not have student records for those types of institutions.
Tilly was wondering how far back missionary records go.
Well, I guess it sort of depends somewhat. I mean, the Board of Foreign Missions was formally organized in 1838 or so. Prior to that date, and I'm trying to remember now exactly when, it was sort of a joint mission agency between Presbyterians and Congregationalists. You had the American Board of Commissioners for Foreign Missions that was organized in the early part of the 19th century. Most of those records are actually at the Houghton Library at Harvard University. Off and on, we'll have records of like personal papers of missionaries. So I think nationally, there really weren't, yeah, it gets kind of a little, I don't know, I'm not explaining that very well, but off and on there were people that were, I guess, charged as being missionaries, perhaps by the General Assembly a bit earlier than 1838. But sort of, it really depends upon what the records of the individual or the mission you're looking for happen to be, like what might be there.
And we have one more question from Miriam Reed. She's raising her hand in the chat, so I'm going to allow her to talk.
Oh.
Hi, Miriam, can you hear us?
Yeah. Hi, Lisa and Charlene. The Board of Foreign Missions, is there a history of it somewhere? And where do you find out about the Board of Foreign Missions, the Presbyterian Board of Foreign Missions? Where are those records?
Hi, Miriam.
There are massive records for the Board of Foreign Missions in our holdings. There isn't like one single collection. Arthur Brown wrote an excellent book, trying to remember quite when it was published, in the 1930s, late 1930s, maybe early 1940s, for the centennial of the establishment of the Board of Foreign Missions of the Presbyterian Church in the USA. 100, I'm trying to remember what the title is, but you know, that's an excellent resource for general information about, you know, the Board of Foreign Missions and the work they've done.
Well, I went, I'm also trying to find out very specifically, when did David Gamble, I believe he was president at one point. And so I've looked him up by name, but I don't get anything at all. And I've gone with Board of Foreign Missions and found some things online. But I thought that that you all would have some files on the boards, on the board records.
Another place, I think maybe I'm going to go to another place on our website for you, Miriam. If I can get this to go. The records of the Board of Foreign Missions, probably for the time period that you're researching anyway,
Right.
are likely described in our finding aids or guides to archival collections. Those records will not be, well, they might be described in Calvin, but it's probably easier to find them to go through our guides to archival collections. So this is, again, just the collections section of our website, some of our catalogs, and then other research tools here. You can find the guides to archival collections. So these are our finding aids.
Yeah, okay.
You know, researchers who've done archival research before will be familiar with finding aids, and you can do a search for records of national agencies, such as the Board of Foreign Missions. You can search all of the different record groups. This portal, I'll say, to our archival collections describes hundreds of different record groups, thousands of cubic feet of material. So you can kind of poke around in here and see what you find. So if this person worked for the Board of Foreign Missions, but was not necessarily a missionary or a
No, he was on
minister,
the board.
yeah. So I mean,
Yeah.
there could be information about him in these records, just about his work for the board. It's not going to be biographical information about him, probably, but this might, you know, these record groups might shed some light on his work for the church.
Well, I'm really trying to find out what these boards did around 1900. Or, you know, how they made their decisions, and who were on the boards. David Gamble was a president, as I understand, and who were the various presidents of the boards, or how were they structured too. So that's, I'm looking at all that. So if I just go to the guides to archival collections and keep on typing things, huh?
Yeah, if you haven't tried searching the finding aids yet, I would recommend trying that too.
Okay.
This collection, it's telling me this is 54 cubic feet of material. So that's
Right.
4 boxes. It's a lot of material.
Right.
But the inventory that describes what's in each box and folder will kind of help you narrow your focus a little bit, hopefully. So I hope that helps.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Good to hear from you.
And we have one more question. I think we're going to take one more question and then wrap up for the day. But William was wondering if there is a list of commissioners to every General Assembly available somewhere.
I'm not aware of a comprehensive list that would show up in the annual minutes of the General Assembly, like who the commissioners were in a particular year. But I mean, unless somebody else is aware of, I'm not aware of any comprehensive list that you can search that's going to cover all of the General Assemblies. And, you know, quite a few of the General Assembly minutes are available online for the different denominations that we document. But unfortunately, you would have to have sort of a time frame which you're looking at, you know, to try to locate that. But generally in the front part of the minutes of the General Assemblies each year would list out all of the commissioners.
I think that's it for questions.
Well, again, if there are more questions, reach out to us by email. And thank you, everyone near and far, for joining us.
Yes, thank you. And yeah, thanks for putting up with us. And I hope it was somewhat helpful. Genealogy is kind of a complicated topic, so.
All right.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks.